This is the Cash Value Solutions Podcast, where your hosts, Jason Pohlmeyer and Kyle Manns, shed light on little-known money truths to help you take control of your financial future and become your own banker. Subscribe, rate, and review the show, and check us out at cashvaluesolutions.com.
All right, guys, we're back in the book review of Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, and we're on part 1, Becoming Your Own Banker. Kyle, where do you want to get started?
Well, we'll start right away in the first paragraph here. Nelson has this quote where it says, if some authoritative power distributed all the money in the world equally among all the people in the world, within 10 years' time, 97% of all the money would be under the control of the 3% of the people again. Do you agree with this?
I'm not sure if I agree with that drastic of a percentage, but when Nelson moderated it later in the paragraph to 75-25, I think that's very realistic.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And this kind of reminds me of when I was reading Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. He had a interview there with Henry Ford, and Henry Ford told him that, if you took away his company and took away all of his money, that he wouldn't be too worried about it because around 6 or so years later, he'd have it all back.
Why do you think that is? What separates somebody, a businessman like Henry Ford, apart from the rest of us?
Well, he obviously has the knack for business. Like he knows what assets and liabilities are. He knows how to take money and grow it, and how to start a business and grow it and keep it going.
And he probably spent a lot of time educating himself about business, about banking, about understanding assets that he wanted to invest in. He probably, I don't even know if they had TV. They might have had black and white TV at that time, but he probably didn't spend a lot of time watching the TV then.
Yeah, so maybe it would have been a different story if he was watching Netflix, if Netflix was around. I don't know.
That has been a society-changing streaming device, hasn't it?
For sure.
Okay. But anyways, back to assets and liabilities and banking. So Robert Kiyosaki and Rich Dad, Poor Dad gave the simplest definition for everybody to understand of what an asset and liability is. Assets put money in your pocket, and liabilities take money out of your pocket. And you can finance both. You can do the banking, perform the banking function with liabilities and with assets. And a lot of people get caught financing liabilities in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you can finance anything. You can finance a sofa. You can finance a PlayStation. You can finance a TV. It's endless what you can finance today.
Yeah, vehicles, homes, right? And is a home an asset, Kyle?
According to Robert Kiyosaki, no. But it makes sense why he's the guy famous for saying your home is not an asset. That your home is taking money out of your pocket.
I agree, and a lot of people will argue that, and they say, well, my home's appreciating in value, and that makes it an asset. But regardless of how much, whether you have 10% of your mortgage paid off or you have no mortgage left, that home's appreciating with that, whether you have it paid off or not, right? Mm-hmm. The only thing that can make it an asset is if, say, you're using it to perform a business and using some of it as an office, maybe. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it costs money to heat, cool, put a roof on it. There's just endless expenses that come along with it, taking money out of your pocket.
Yeah, and you can have something happen like what happened in 2008, and housing prices crashed. It's not a given that your house is always going to appreciate.
Yeah, good point, Kyle. I like that. So part of the reason that Nelson put that quote in there, we believe, is because people understood the difference between assets and liabilities. But as Nelson has said, if you understand that banking will be performed in your life and you perform the banking function, that puts you in a place where you're going to keep building capital in your life. And you could be part of the 25% that owns 75% of the capital or the money in the world.
Yeah, and he says that most people just do not understand what banking is. And, I can kind of relate with that. Before all this, you think of the bank as a place you go to when put your paycheck in, or if you need a loan to buy something. That's kind of the extent that you think of it as.
Yeah, before I read Nelson's book, it never even crossed my mind that, I can perform the banking function in my life and profit from doing that. It was just something that, and not only for me, but I think the people that we're talking to, business owners, families, entrepreneurs, investors, I think that doesn't cross a lot of people's mind. And if we can help to educate people about the banking function with this podcast, that's our goal, guys.
Mission accomplished then.
Mission accomplished. I like that.
And he also says that, banking is the most important business in the world. Banking keeps money flowing. And if money doesn't flow, we have huge problems. I mean, this podcast is taking place in May of 2020, and we're right in the middle of the Corona apocalypse. Money has quit flowing. And I mean, look around. We don't know what's going to happen after this, but we have seen what happens when money quits flowing.
And look what's happened. The government is just flooding the economy with money, right? They're trying to make all these loans available for businesses. And the first round that they did of this QE, so to speak, the money was all taken, and they've already put out another, I'm not sure what the amount is, but more money available to businesses. And if you solve for the banking function, solve for your need for capital with whole life insurance, IBC, you wouldn't be in that position where you're reliant on somebody else for capital.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Okay, I think the next thing we should hit on, Nelson talks about the money pool, and I think this is one of the most important things, and it actually was part of the reason when I read this, I was like, okay, Nelson's onto something here. This makes sense to me. And Nelson was saying that there's only one pool of money in the world. And how he did this was by taking a step back and talking about the world and how there's only one pool of water. Okay, think about when you guys are in elementary school and you probably had a globe in the classroom and a lot of it was blue, wasn't it? Okay, 75-80% of the earth is water. When the water is heated up by the sun, it evaporates, wind currents pull it around the earth, it precipitates out, it lands in ponds, on land, in rivers, over the ocean, right? It's all intermixing. It's just controlled in different rivers, different ponds, different streams, different lakes, but it's really only one big pool of water. And that's the point that Nelson was making with there's only one pool of money in the world. Regardless of who's controlling it, what bank, what insurance company, what corporation, what currency denomination it's in, it's all just one big pool of money. And the more of it you control, the more of the banking function you can control in your life. Money's going to flow to you and away from you. And the simplest way to think about that is look at your paycheck. Look at how much money's coming out of it. Look at how much money in taxes, health insurance, dental insurance. Are there some other things that you can think of, Kyle, that just come to mind of other expenses that just flow to us and flow away from us and we don't think anything of it?
Well, if you're a business owner, you have leasing expense, you have inventory expense, you have payroll expense, you have insurance expense.
Those are dollars that once they flow away from you, if you haven't created a system that you control to perform the banking function, are dollars that will never work for you again. When you pay money into a life insurance policy, as soon as a dollar passes through that policy, as long as you borrow, use policy loans, collateralize the cash value to use it as a financing tool, that dollar is working for you the rest of your life.
Yeah, as long as you don't lapse the policy and you keep it in force, when you put a dollar in there, it works for you forever.
Good point. Thank you for saying that. So, I guess that's really the pool of money. That was just unbelievably impactful to me when I read that. And I think that if you guys read this book, that it'll have the same impact on you.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, Jason, let's move on to how the infinite banking concept got started. So in this part of the book, Nelson talks about his beginnings. So he was a forester, which he speaks how that requires long-range thinking. And he says that you're dealing with compound interest over a long period of time with no taxation on the buildup.
Okay, so why did Nelson say that? As trees are growing, there's no taxation on the buildup, right? He's just trying to lay out that is similar to how the life insurance policy functions. It's tax-deferred growth, which when we structure policies properly and implement them correctly, we can use the money tax-free, right? And I think he's just trying to make a connection here between, there was a lot of similarities between the forestry business and how an infinite banking concept policy functions.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And so to go along with that too, we're also dealing with long time horizons, just like we are with infinite banking, right? We aren't starting this policy and in 3 years planning to exit, right? Once we start these policies, we want to keep them in force for our entire lives.
Yep. Yeah, and that's kind of his next point, how he says the reverse fact is you must make an investment and you won't see any result for that for that same long period.
And what is that similar to with your IBC policy? Capitalization, right?
Yeah, the capitalization period.
Right, and Nelson goes into further detail on that later in the book, but with any business that you start, there's a capitalization period. With life insurance, it happens to be a lot shorter than with any other type of business. And you have immediate liquidity with this IBC policy, which many businesses don't offer you if you're relying on some other entity for funding.
And next, he talks about how he moved into life insurance sales for over 30 years, says how he made a good living. And he said, knowing how dividend-paying life insurance works is an essential ingredient to it all. And he said that most people have a minimal understanding of this subject, and including most of the people at the home offices of these insurance companies.
I think that has some truth to it.
Yeah.
And I think it further emphasizes why, if you're interested in an infinite banking concept policy, that you should work with somebody that's a part of the Nelson Nash Institute, an authorized practitioner, because we don't want you guys to get into a policy that you aren't happy with 2 years, 3 years down the road. We can do this thing correctly today, so let's do it that way.
Yep. Yeah, and so next he talks about his venture in real estate and how at the beginning he could do nothing but win. And then things kind of turned for him, which ultimately gave rise to the infinite banking concept.
Yeah, I think ultimately everything in Nelson's life helped him to think up the infinite banking concept, so to speak. But I think that this problem that he ran into in real estate, okay, it went good in the beginning, but then as he said, the lever went the other way and things weren't so good for him anymore. I think this was, I'm not sure if I should say fundamental, but this was a huge part of what developed the infinite banking concept, because it was pain that he felt in his financial life. And he was in financial prison, to be honest. So let's go into it a little bit. Nelson did some real estate dealings. He was successful in the late 70s, and he even went on a trip for a whole month from a property that he invested in and never even saw off the profits from. Okay. He went on a trip off the profits from that property that he never even saw. I mean, as he said, he thought he could do no wrong.
Yep.
And so at the time, rates that Nelson was paying to borrow this money, this is the lever that he's talking about, using leverage. Okay. 8% was the prime rate. But if you're not a prime borrower, you have to pay 9.5%. Okay. Easy enough. Just a little insight for you guys. The prime rate today is 3.25%. Just thought you might want to know that. Okay, let's move on further now. In 1981 and 1982, prime rate rose to 21.5%. Again, add 1.5% on top of that, and you're at 23%. Kyle, how much money was he paying 23% interest on?
He was paying 23% interest on $500,000. And let's think of that in terms of 1981 and 1982. That's like $1.4 million in today's money. And that equated to about $67,500 in interest per year that he was not expecting to pay.
So Nelson, I mean, he was in a very tight spot, okay? And, okay, maybe we should move on further now. We've went over the rates a little bit. We might come back to that, but what else happened in his life? He was going through a lot of hardships happening in succession of each other. Kyle, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. In November of 1980, he was robbed. And 2 months later, his brother died of a heart attack. And then 5 months later, his granddaughter was born and shortly after was diagnosed with cancer. I mean, talk about a rough, 6-month deal there.
He was, I'm not sure why that happened. Nelson was a very religious man, and I think that he believed, and I believe that God has a plan and there's a reason for how things happen. But, I mean, he just hit struggle after struggle after struggle, not only financially, but in his family life. And all these things culminated into him doing a lot of praying, and he was just, for lack of a better terms, he didn't know where to go. And that's why he was led to the prayer life. And through that, he discovered the infinite banking concept. He discovered his cash flows were going to the wrong person.
Yeah, he said that in his book, he quotes, he heard the voice that was saying, "You are standing in the midst of everything it takes to get out, but you don't see it because you look at things like everyone else. You can get to money during these awful times at 5 to 8% from 3 different life insurance companies through policies that you own. The only thing that limits how much you can get to is the same thing they tell you at the bank when you ask them how big of a check you can write. How much have you put in?"
Right. Nelson realized, I am paying over $100,000 a year in interest to a traditional bank, a third party, a bank that he is not in control of, he doesn't share in the profits of. There is no benefit to him from using this bank, right?
Yep.
And he realized, man, if I start changing my cash flow, paying larger premiums, he was already paying large premiums, paying larger premiums into his whole life policies, that he could then turn around, borrow the money out of those policies, and begin to pay off the snakes and dragons, as he called them, the traditional bank.
Mm-hmm. And he also says, which I think we've all have come across this in our lives, that hardship often helps us to see things to which we were normally blind. Like if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, I mean, Nelson had, I think, the ultimate hardships in front of him, not only financially, but being robbed, having family difficulties. I mean, my goodness, the guy was going through everything at once, and maybe the only bright spot, the light at the end of the tunnel, was he discovered the infinite banking concept, and he created a good life for himself, not only to get out of the financial prison that he was in, but he also made a good living then teaching other people the infinite banking concept. And
then we're all able to reap the rewards too of learning the concept and being able to implement it in our own lives.
Yeah, thankfully Nelson wanted to get this message out and teach as many people as he could about that, and he did that through his seminars. He wrote this book for us, for the people that weren't able to attend his seminars. And as Kyle and I said earlier, if you guys want to see Nelson's seminar, you can go to the Nelson Nash Institute, and you can find that seminar on DVD. I believe it's about $200. And I know that sounds like a lot of money to you guys, but it is well worth every dollar. There is so much information in that seminar on DVD that isn't in this book. It's a great tool to learn the infinite banking concept if you guys want it straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, straight from the creator. Like, I don't know if there's a better way to learn it.
Absolutely. Okay, Kyle, I think that we've gone through these 2 sections pretty thoroughly. Is there anything that you want to add?
No, I think we have too. We'll be looking forward to joining you guys next time.
Okay. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
This was the Cash Value Solutions Podcast. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review the show. Check us out at cashvaluesolutions.com. And don't forget to tune in next week.